Thank you so much for your patience, for those of you who were early. All right, so now that we're beginning, ladies, gentlemen, specially invited guests, good morning. My name is Genesis Alfred, and I'll be your mistress of ceremonies for this morning's proceedings. As we begin, I would first like to take note of today before we mark the commemoration of our Climate Tipping Point launch. I'd also like to make note that today, April 22nd, is also Earth Day. And the theme for this year's Earth Day is Our Power, Our Planet. So just remember that for the rest of the day, because I'll keep bringing it up and ask you all what's the theme for the day. So as we move smoothly ahead with our program, I would like to call on Ms. Brody Lewis, the president of the Caribbean Youth Environmental Network, to lead us in a word of prayer. Please, ladies and gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind standing. Thank you very much.
Good morning, all. Thank you all for attending once again. Can you please sign yourself, Catholics? Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us here safely. We pray for those who are on their way and they arriving here safely. Thank you for the beauty of the earth and the wonders of nature that surround us. We have inspired young hearts to create. Thank you for the beauty of the earth and the wonders of nature that surround us. We have inspired young hearts to care for your creation with love and respect. We pray that you continue to give us the courage to keep protecting the planet, to speak up for what is right, and to live in ways that bring healing to the earth. We pray that the future is greener, healthier, and better. May we continue to grow into wise stewards of the world and you have given us. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you so much, Ms. Louis. You may now sit. As we move along smoothly, I would like to call on Ms. Leandra Pinnell. Yes, Miss Leandra Pinnell to give her remarks on behalf of the British High Commission. Can we welcome Ms. Pinnell, please?
Oh, 4 feet. Thank you, Ms. Alfred, and good morning to all of you, our esteemed guests, colleagues, and friends, and to our viewers at home. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you here today on behalf of the resident British Commissioner, Ms. Amy Quantrill, to the launch of Climate Tipping Point. We are not just here to celebrate a publication. We are here to recognize a pivotal moment in our collective journey toward understanding and addressing one of the most pressing challenges of our time, the climate crisis. As we stand together today, we are reminded of the stark realities of climate change that we face daily. The devastation wrought by Hurricane Beryl just last year, the unprecedented flooding in the UK, and wildfires that rage across continents are not distant threats. They are urgent calls to action. They remind us that climate change is not merely an environmental issue. It is a social and economic one. It is one with implications, for our health, safety, and our livelihoods. The United Kingdom is committed to addressing the climate crisis head on. The Prime Minister's pledge to reduce emissions by 81% by 2035 is a testament to the UK's determination to transition to a clean energy superpower. We recognize that this journey extends beyond UK borders. It requires global collaboration and investment. So our commitment of £11.6 billion in climate finance from 2021 to 2026 reflects our dedication to supporting vulnerable regions like the Caribbean. The United Kingdom is proud to partner with regional institutions like the Caribbean Development Bank and Inter-American Development Bank. Our contributions to projects that enhance climate resilience, such as the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road Upgrade Project, underscore our commitment to building a sustainable future. We are also investing in innovative initiatives like the Geothermal Energy Project and Sustainable CMOS Farming, which not only support local economies but also promote environmental stewardship. Let us remember that our collective action is essential. The challenges we are facing are daunting but not insurmountable. Together, we have the power to advocate for a sustainable future, to amplify our voices, and to inspire next generation of climate communicators and advocates. So today, let us embrace the spirit of collaboration and creativity as we work towards safeguarding our planet for generations to come. And I say that very heavily because now I'm a mom, so generations to come. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to impactful discussions that will follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pinnell. Now we go back to forfeit. As we move smoothly along, yes, I say smoothly along, we would like to call on Ms. Dawn Pierre-Nafoniel, the Chief Technical Officer for the Department of Sustainable Development, to give her brief remarks. Can we please welcome Ms. Nafoniel?
Okay.
Okay, good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Okay. It is really my honor to be here as the Chief Sustainable Development and Environment Officer of the Department of Sustainable Development. That is a government agency that is charged with coordinating, enabling, mobilizing, facilitating climate efforts and climate actions, along with the rest of St. Lucia. Over the years, as the Department of Sustainable Development, we have had a cabinet-endorsed climate change committee, a national climate change committee, that has now well enshrined as in the Climate Change Act of 2024. And in so doing, we have been able to engage the youth in terms of having them as a key player and active partner in climate action on this National Climate Change Committee, and to ensure that further to the Cabinet conclusion, it is now enshrined in the Climate Change Act. We have also engaged the youth in leading the charge and enlightening and empowering others in terms of climate action, and that is through debates, through competitions, through school presentations led by the youth leaders. And a couple of them are actually in this room. We have also involved the youth as paid interns linked to various government agencies to gain experience and to help influence climate action. We've helped to provide opportunities for training and capacity building on climate action at the national level and also at the international level. For example, through the Commonwealth Youth Climate Change Negotiations Training, as well as through the Climate Youth Negotiator training. And I see at least one or two, of course, of the reps in here as well. All of this to say that we've also included them in active negotiations. So when we go to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, we have the youth with us at those conferences, leading climate action, being responsible for key areas. And again, a couple of them are in the room with us today. We know that climate action cannot be taken unilaterally. It cannot be done alone. It involves the public sector, it involves the private sector, civil society, academia, a key component being the youth. I had the privilege of working with Dr. Fletcher as a fisheries biologist in the Ministry of Agriculture. He was the permanent secretary at the time. And I also had the privilege of working with him as the minister with responsibility for climate change, where we were down in the trenches with climate action, fighting for this Paris Agreement, which was adopted, and being instrumental in the Article 8 on loss and damage that has been enshrined in the Paris Agreement. A really key development and achievement for St. Lucia, for small island developing states, and for the world. And Dr. Fletcher has continued to put his efforts and the resources into climate action, into enlightenment and empowerment, using a number of various means. I remember 1.5 to Stay Alive, using song and the spoken word, and I see my past PS as well in the audience, Mr. Sylvester Closel, and working on that 1.5 to Stay Alive, using the youth to impart the message, using creative song and spoken word and art. We know that one of our authors today is Dawn French, and I've also had the privilege of working with Dawn French when she was the director of the National Emergency Management Organization, or NEMO. And specifically, I remember Dawn. Where is Dawn? There she is. I remember working on her in terms of enshrining the engineering guidelines for incorporating climate change into the determination of wind forces on buildings and other structures, and putting that under the general rubric of the emergency management for St. Lucia. That would have been in 2009 or thereabout, Dawn. She was also a very active member of the National Climate Change Committee, that technical advisory body that I mentioned, that has public sector, private sector, and civil society agencies. Now, I don't think Dawn has forgiven me a few years ago for not being able. I was up to my ears in work, and I was not able to review one of her many wonderful publications. And I had to say no at that point. So I hope that she's forgiven me for that. And I remember being so busy at the time. I would like to say that my life has changed since then, but I think I'm still up to my ears. But meanwhile, Dawn, not this Dawn, has used her creativity, her literary skills in preparing a number of publications over the years on very important matters, whether they be social matters, economic matters, developmental matters, environmental matters, among others. I once worked with Mr. Milton Branford. It was on a PSA for the Department of Sustainable Development. And it was done in English and Creole, and we still use it today. It was done a few years ago, but we did it in a way that allowed us to continue to use it. So it has been able to be instrumental in our public awareness that we do at schools and so on. So I feel like I know the players in this particular endeavor that is happening right now and that is underway. The graphic novel series produced by the Caribbean Climate Justice Project, Youth IRI, in collaboration with the British High Commission, indeed truly brings to life the urgent issues of climate change, exploring its causes and effects. Whether we're talking about scorching temperatures and droughts, forest fires with impacts on human health, on livestock, on crops, whether we're talking about heavy and erratic rainfall patterns leading to floods and landslides, increasingly stronger and unpredictable tropical storms and hurricanes, and the devastation left in their wake. Whether we're talking about sea level rise and the loss of beaches, coastal settlements, buildings and infrastructure, saltwater intrusion into freshwater supplies and agricultural lands. Social, economic, environmental loss and damage, and impacts also on mental health. The situation is getting increasingly dire. So we need such creative undertakings such as these. We need to continue to use all methods at our disposal to engage and empower everyone, particularly the youth, who are already influencing change and serving as the leaders of today. So the Department of Sustainable Development salutes this undertaking, and we will use our social media platforms to promote the effort. All hands on deck, using methods such as this one, is the only way we can tackle this climate change monster, like an octopus, master of change, using its many tentacles, hitting it at every front towards climate enlightenment, empowerment, and resilience. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Piano Forniel. I'd just like to ask one question again before we move forward. Did anybody remember the theme for Earth Day 2025? No? Yes? No? Okay, well, I'll remind you again. Our power, our planet. Just remember that because I'll ask it again. But as we move right along, I would like to call on the founder of Youth IRI, the Caribbean Climate Justice Project, and Soloricon, and also to many of you here, a climate change, I guess you are a hero for St. Lucia, Dr. James Jimmy Fletcher, to give his brief remarks on the Climate Tipping Point novel and how it all came about. So come on, Dr. Fletcher, can we give him a round of applause, please?
Thank you, Genesis. Thank you, Genesis. I guess it's because of Genesis's height. She's calling on everybody to give brief remarks. I know I'm wrong for that, Genesis. I know. Okay, good morning, everyone. Great to see all of you here. This really is a good day for us. But before I do anything, I really want to thank the British High Commission for so graciously allowing us to use their premises. It really is, if we talk in Earth Day, if we talk in the environment, this is really the perfect place to do it. I know the resident British Commissioner would have liked to have been with us today, but unfortunately, the government also saw the significance of Earth Day and decided to have the opening of Parliament on Earth Day. So that has caused some people to have conflicting engagements, and our resident British Commissioner is one. So why are we here? Well, first, before I tell you why we are here, let's just take a look at what God has said. 9 years ago today, exactly 9 years ago today, I was at UN headquarters signing on behalf of the government of St. Lucia the articles that allowed St. Lucia to both adopt and accede to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Paris Agreement. St. Lucia is one of 15 countries, the first 15 countries in the world that actually acceded, both signed and acceded to the treaty. And that, I think, was a very significant undertaking on our part. And in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, I was bored, I couldn't travel, I couldn't work, I couldn't do anything. I kind of thought of, okay, what should I do to keep myself active, but also to make a positive contribution to our country and our region? And I decided to launch this thing called the Caribbean Climate Justice Project. This was prompted by an encounter I had with someone who's become a very dear friend of mine, Oro Fraser. Oro is the head of the Caribbean's program for Open Society Foundations. And I remember I met with Oro on a trip that we had. Richard Branson had organized this activity, this 2-day activity on Necker Island to look at renewable energy and how can we advance renewable energy. And among the people at that gathering was Oro Fraser. And we started talking, and I told him of my interest in climate justice. Actually, it was climate change at the time because my focus was climate change. And he said to me, well, why don't you look at climate justice? Because I think for the Caribbean, climate justice is actually just as important, because you're talking about, from a rights-based perspective, you're talking about people are vulnerable. Oro is from Guyana, by the way. Our people are vulnerable, so maybe you should start looking at it from a climate justice lens. I said, okay, that sounds good. Let me do a little bit more research into this. And if I do, would Open Society Foundations be interested in funding? He said, yes, let's have a conversation about it. So there was a back and forth that went between Oro and myself. And eventually, we got some funding in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic to launch the Caribbean Climate Justice Project. And what we've done along the way is, first of all, we hosted the first regional youth parliament on climate justice. And I must, I like always to give credit to people who have given me advice and pointers along the way. And this actually was the recommendation of Anya Edwin. Anya at the time, I think, was the vice president of the National Youth Council. She was also the vice president of the Caribbean, or she was one of the vice presidents of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. And I was talking to Anya about what do we do to get young people engaged? And she said, well, why don't you have a youth parliament? I said, yeah, okay, but we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic. She said, well, yeah, have it as a virtual youth parliament. So we did this. We had this virtual youth parliament looking at climate justice. We advertised and we asked young people from across the Caribbean to tell us why they would want to take part in this first Caribbean Regional Youth Parliament. And we had almost 250 entries, I remember. And we had to bring it down to 15 young people from across the Caribbean. And we chose them. They gave an excellent account of themselves. If you want to see the proceedings of that youth parliament, they're actually on our website, caribbeanclimatejustice.org. And we also had some very dynamic speakers there. We had people like Selwyn Hart, who is now the Assistant Secretary General at the UN with responsibility for climate change. We had Fabienne Cousteau. Some of you may be too young, but I see some older heads in the room who would remember Jacques Cousteau. We all grew up watching Jacques Cousteau and his exploits on his ship. Fabian is actually his grandson, and Fabian was the one who did the feature address virtually at this first youth parliament. And there was quite a few other people there, like Colin Young, for example, the executive director of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. Following which, we then had a resolution on climate justice that was presented, and we then submitted this resolution far and wide to the UN, to Paris Agreement, all bodies. And then we decided, okay, let's have a competition. Let's see how we can get young people ready to think about climate change, to get from them where their head is, where they see us heading as a country, as a region, as a planet. So we hosted 3 competitions. One, a poetry competition, one a prose competition, and the third, a photography competition. We opened it to young people from across the Caribbean, and we were overwhelmed with entries. We had almost 300 entries for essays. And, we asked them to write on various things. So imagine yourself as the prime minister of your country delivering an address to the United Nations on climate change. What would you say? Imagine you are trying to convince a climate skeptic friend that climate change is real. How would you put it? What do you think the Caribbean will look like by 2035 if we do nothing about climate change? And we got some really excellent entries: prose, poetry. Poetry, we had almost 200 entries. Photography, I think 175 entries. The difficulty was curating that and really distilling it down to something that we could put in a publication. We only did one publication, Where is the Justice, which is behind you. And any of you are interested, I have a few copies that I can make available to you, but it's also available on Amazon. And that was an excellent publication. And this is something that we plan on doing in the future. And then we decided, yes, as I said, the winning entries were published in this anthology, Where is the Justice? And these are some of the excerpts. We had people from St. Lucia who contributed, people from all across the Caribbean. But we also decided that we needed to empower the young people who were part of this. It wasn't just a matter of giving them a few, they got 500 US, those whose entries were winning, and maybe that's why we had so many entries. But those whose entries were the winning entries got 500 US, but we figured that was not enough. We needed to empower them to do things in their own country, in their own community. So we started giving out grants. So we gave out grants to people like the Femlex cohort. That's a group in Barbados who did some work with some young lawyers, young female lawyers, to get them to start thinking about environmental law and climate law. We gave money to the Dominica Arts and Craft Producers Association to put up a greenhouse and to also do some trips in the forest so that they could start collecting and building up a germplasm of some of the things that they would like to produce. I think they produce soap and jewelry from indigenous materials. And we also provided support here in St. Lucia. So we supported the kitchen garden for the Holy Family Children's Home in Groseley and the Rainbow Children's Home in Vieux-Fort, allowed them to set up a kitchen garden. We co-sponsored and facilitated the Caribbean Climate Justice Youth Camp in St. Martin. We had one of our members, one of our affiliates, Snalia Mahal. Snalia presented at this climate justice camp in St. Martin. We also provided some support, and I see Zeista and Cornelius here. Zeista and Cornelius said, well, if you want a cause to support peace, Faces of Development in Dennery, they're doing some excellent work with young people, and they're not choosing the young people who normally are members of the NYC. They're choosing disadvantaged, vulnerable young people and working with them over the summer period. They did some excellent work for STEAM Camp. Zeista and Cornelius, raise your hands so we can see you. Yeah, from Dennery. We gave them some support last year because they were looking at STEAM and looking at climate change. So we've always been looking to see who we can support and what aligns with our vision. And we sponsored Nuive Carnival Band, Kiddies Carnival Band last year. That's run by my friend here, my friend from Form 1 at St. Mary's College, Reginald Segis, his wife, Joanna. They placed second. I think they should have won, but I'm biased. They portrayed Chalet Show last year, and it was great to see the kiddies in the Chalet Show because it was really hot, doing a portrayal, a depiction of climate change and looking at the various elements of climate change. So these are some of the things that we've done, and we've been able to do it with the help of some corporate partners. You might recognize this gentleman. He's in the audience right now. He looks the same way that he looked back then. At the time, he was the professor at St. George's University. So I reached out to Damien. Damien and I have been friends from St. Mary's College. We've sat on the same benches throughout. I reached out to Damien. I said, how can we get some of the young people in your social sciences program thinking about climate change? I don't just want it to be people involved in the environment thinking about climate change, but how can we get people particularly looking at the nexus between climate change and health, looking at this whole issue of climate change? So we actually had, over 2 successive years, some very interesting competitions where we challenged the young people to put both in writing, in prose, but also in depiction that we asked them to put on YouTube what they thought about climate change and what climate change meant to them. And of the maybe 20 entries we got, I'm just going to show you 3 of them.
Global CO2 emissions and climate change are on a rise, mainly as a result
Randall,
of
we need
increased
some
dependence
audio.
and burning of fossil fuels by developed countries. But why is that bad? Take a look for yourself. From melting ice caps to drought to flooding and even sinking islands, extremes have now become our new norm. But who then bears the cost of it all? Is it the developed countries emitting the CO2? It should be, right? In a just world, it would be so, but that is not the case. Pause this video and compare these 2 maps. Are the most affected countries the same as those causing the climate change? No. And that, my friend, is climate injustice, where those who least influence climate change are the most affected. Water security is a nation's ability to provide safe and quality water for survival and productive activities. That means as a result of climate change, affected countries may face poor food security due to drought, no clean water due to contamination of fresh water sources by flood, and even an increase in waterborne diseases due to destruction of infrastructures, overall causing poor water security.
Warning up front because of the topic that it's covering. There's a warning at the end, but I also felt I should give you a warning at the front because it looks at the nexus between climate change and mental health.
My crops I will wither away, succumb to the scorch of the sun. Like my wrists, I have bled every day to overcome the injustices done. The earth is warming for everyone, they say, yet we are the only ones bearing the brunt. We the farmers, the fishers, the old, we the jobless have shriveled to bone. We have watched our food dry up into dust. We have witnessed our hope wash away with the floods. Still, we are told to stand tall and stay strong. No room for grief, anxiety, or depression. No compensatory efforts or teaching to cope, while the main persecutors live life like the Pope. Consumed by the mental pain of life, no future in sight, thus I resort to this knife. The trauma of being the vulnerable, the mental strain we bear intolerable. As I end this misery, I hope my blood can do more than nourish my crops that lay dead on the floor. I hope it brings justice to the weak and sanity to the poor, for this climate injustice we've been made to endure.
Okay, so those 3 videos were just a sample of the videos that were done by young people who are not environmentalists. They're not climate scientists. These are young people who their main focus is social science and health, and through their research they were able to do this. And like I said, there are 20 of them. We will be posting those on our website. Just one thing, it's a little bit unfortunate she said live by the Pope, because the Pope who died yesterday was probably the Pope who did the most for climate change. But I guess you understand what the point she was making in there. So Youth IRI, again, in 2024, it's another thing that I decided, you know what? We've been looking at climate change, but there's also a need to look at the energy transition and how do we move away from using fossil fuels to using the abundance of renewable energy we have. The sun for solar, wind. We're also fortunate to have access to geothermal energy. How do we do that so that we can play our part? Although we are minuscule contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, but we need to show that we have some skin in this game, not only because of the fact that electricity costs quite a bit of money. It's 35 US cents per kilowatt hour. And that's because Lucelec, our friends who've been supporting us all this time, have to use fossil fuels, have to use diesel oil for them to generate electricity. So if you can move away from using diesel to now using wind, using solar, using geothermal, we can bring the price down and we can reduce our carbon footprint. So Youth IRI is Youth Innovators for Renewable and Inclusive Energy. So this was now galvanizing young people to look at climate change, but through the lens of sustainable energy. How do we get them excited about this energy transition? And what we did was, first of all, have 4 webinars over the course of 4 weeks where we try to educate young people about the energy transition, about climate change. And those 4 webinars were prerequisite or precondition to attending a convening in St. Lucia. So we said we will be hosting a 4-day convening in St. Lucia, but a precondition is that you must have attended all 4 of the webinars. And we had excellent participation. We had maybe over 300 people. On average, I think we had 200 people who attended all 4 of the webinars. And again, the challenge was whittling that down to 40, 45 people. We had a very successful 4-day regional convening in June last year in St. Lucia. We brought together 45 young people from across the Caribbean. I see some of them in the room, Kina, Marcus, who are here with us. And they were presenters like Danelle, who spoke to them, the presenters who were their age, who were young people themselves, and showing them how this energy transition is not something just for older people, but young people can get involved in it. And that was probably even more successful than anything we've done with the Caribbean Climate Justice Project so far. We produced 2 documentaries with the help of our friends at Allbiz, Calabash TV.
I rise to introduce the draft resolution.
Today I echo the plea of my Indigenous fellows.
Land ownership is a very serious issue. Hashtag no climate emergency.
And I personally remember the heartbreaking stories of women.
Mr. Speaker, Caribbean youth have a voice.
They have been marginalized for far too long.
Remember the faces. Remember the voices.
Hi, I'm Amy Ramkisoon.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Chelsea Antwine.
I'm a farmer. I play celebrity cricket.
And I study endangered parrots.
Remember the curiosity.
I didn't know that these things go on behind the scenes. I know that sometimes it can seem as though it's just a doom and gloom situation.
For the average young person, that feels like it is the problem of those people over there.
Where's the conversation around renewable resource?
There is more to learn.
That was the first time I really had to step back and say, whoa.
We are already battling historic injustices, but this unsolicited climate emergency, which is saddled on our backs, leaves us with a stark choice: fight or be swept away.
Good morning, honorable members.
When youth from across the Caribbean met in St. Lucia for Youth IRE convening,
Honorable members,
a key agenda item was energy transition.
I rise to introduce the draft resolution on sustainable energy and climate justice.
A youth parliament held as part of the St. Lucia hosted conference advanced a conversation on the Caribbean's imperative to lessen dependence on fossil fuels.
Together, let us make history by adopting this resolution. Let it be known that in this defining moment, we chose courage over complacency, action over inaction, and justice over indifference. The future of our islands, our people, and our planet depends on it.
The focus began weeks before as the Caribbean Climate Justice Project, which both the Youth IRE concept, held a series of webinars to sensitize youth on the concept of energy transition.
So what is the energy transition? Essentially, in one sentence, a movement from a fossil fuel-based economy towards one that is based on renewable energy sources.
We also took some of these young people and had them attend Red Lac, and I see there's somebody from the SLUNCF, St. Lucia National Conservation Fund. St. Lucia National Conservation Fund hosted Red Lac in St. Lucia, which is a convening on environmental issues, particularly from a biodiversity perspective. That's held in a different country every year, and for the first time it was held in the Caribbean, and St. Lucia hosted it very successfully. So we had our young people from Youth IRE actually present at Red Lac. We had a panel dedicated just for the discussing youth matters, and Kina, who's in the room, our celebrity cricketer, was on that panel. We also took some of our young people to Rio de Janeiro for the Latin American Caribbean Energy Convening in 2024, and you'll see some of them there. You'll see Danelle, you will see Genesis in there, and that allowed them to be part of this conversation. You know, my thinking is that we have to stop telling young people that their time will come or they're the leaders of tomorrow. They're the leaders of today, and their creativity, their passion, their energy is what will give us really, I think, some of the direction that we need. People my age always tend to think of, oh, well, we've done that already, we shouldn't do it. But the young people don't come with that baggage. They see things clearly, they see things through a different set of lens. And from working with them, I can tell you that the energy they bring, the passion they bring, the creativity that they bring, we are really poor as a country and as a region for not embracing our young people more. And that is something that I've tried to do with both Youth IRE and Caribbean Climate Justice Project, is to involve young people as much as possible, take ideas from them, not talk down to them and tell them we're doing this, but ask them, okay, what should we do? How do you, and then give them a little bit of my own knowledge, my own experience, but really allow them to shape the conversation. And these young people really held their own in a group of very seasoned, serious energy experts from across the world, particularly from Latin America and the Caribbean. I remember Genesis doing a presentation, and Genesis does not come from an energy background. Genesis comes from a natural science background. She stood up in front of a room of over 200 people and spoke about why energy is important and why renewable energy is important for the Caribbean and for Latin America. And I think these are some of the things that we really have to promote. And we provided grants for community-based projects by our Youth IRE ambassadors in Dominica, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Grenada. Again, empowering them so that they can do some of the things that they want to do and that they feel necessary, and can also inspire some of the young people in their countries to do the same thing. And we sponsored visits, this visit of students of the Stanley John Odlum School of Arts, Media and Design, to the great work that Kathleen and her Helen's Daughters team are doing at Hotel Chocolat with the Helen's Daughters Farm. So again, it shows you how we try to mix things up quite a bit so that we not just focus on the big picture things, not just on negotiations, but also on the grassroots activities. And Youth IRE just recently, last month, a few weeks ago, Youth IRE delegates attended the Re-Energize Caribbean 2025 workshop in Barbados that was held on the margins of the Global Sustainable Energy for All discussion. So that takes us to where we are today, which is the launch of the graphic novel series. So I'll now call on Randall to cue the video, and then I will call on my good friend, Mr. Junior Branford, and Don French to take us through it. But let's just see a short video of what this graphic novel series is all about. thank you. And Genesis, I'll save you having to come back up by asking Brani and Dawn to take the podium. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again. So, at the start of this project, I was confronted by one simple question. How do we inspire real, lasting change, particularly with the current youth and the generations to come? Now, this seemed like deja vu, because that question was one that was introduced to me by Arlene Regis of the Rare Center for Conservation in 2002. At that time, I was invited by Arlene to do something new, to explore something new, using radio drama storytelling to advocate for social change. That project, Apwe Plaisir, for me, started as an experiment, but grew into something far bigger than we imagined. We actually produced 365 episodes. And we also established a manual that defined the methodology for creating similar programs. I was later told that that methodology was used in the wider Caribbean, in the Pacific, and also is still being used today in Belize. That experience and the success of that project convinced me of a powerful truth. The creative storytelling, when fused with entertainment and education, has the ability to engage, sensitize, and influence people at a much deeper level. It can shift perspectives, change behaviors, and ultimately transform societies. So when Dr. Fletcher approached me with the idea of a youth-focused climate advocacy project, I knew we had to take the storytelling approach to another level. I suggested a medium that is both visually compelling and emotionally resonant. Graphic novels, comics to most of us. Now, comics have an incredible power. They are flexible, accessible, and they create a tangible connection with their readers. When we hold a physical book in our hand, the experience stays with us. The story, the message becomes real to us. This idea, though, was not random. I've been an avid reader of comics from a very early age, and I still read comics today. One of my favorites growing up was the Classics Illustrated comic books. How many of you have read Classics Illustrated? Anybody? Okay, so I cannot age myself there right now. All right. And one of the favorites there, they brought to, these comics brought to me things like issues like The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas, Macbeth by William Shakespeare. And let's just face it, young people would not gravitate to reading those tales in the original format, the printed format. But with the comics, it brought to me the excitement of those stories. And that's the power of the medium. That's why whether we published a hard copy, ebooks, or webcomics, using a format that young people naturally gravitate to is an excellent and effective way of bringing important messages like climate change to them, directly to them. The need for climate action has never been clearer. My preliminary research, and we have to do this for all of the stories that we put together, led me to the UNDP's People's Climate Vote, which found that 80% of people globally want stronger climate policies. And this wasn't just a poll. It was the largest survey of public opinion on climate change, spanning 50 countries and reaching people through mobile gaming platforms. The message coming out of this survey is undeniable. The world is demanding change. Now, just imagine if 20% of today's most influential adults pushed for climate change, climate action. Perhaps leaders could implement bolder science-backed environmental policies, accelerating global progress towards sustainability. I note that when influential voices champion sustainability, entire communities could shift towards greener behavior. The transition to green technology can also drive job creation and economic stability. And the fact that the climate crisis does not respect borders leads me to believe that the only way to battle it is through cooperation. But let's take it further. What if we inspire the next 2 generations of leaders with powerful science-driven storytelling? What if young minds were exposed to the vivid portrayals of climate change's effects through stories they could see, feel, and relate to? Perhaps climate change would no longer be an abstract concept to those youth, but a lived reality. Maybe future leaders would be equipped to enact policies based on understanding and not just obligation. And we know that young people of any generation does not like to be forcibly obligated to any kind of policy or idea. They would rather embrace it through assimilation, making it their own, and then the passion follows after that. Then environmental consciousness could become ingrained in our values, not just a trend. And their stories, those young people, could unify communities worldwide in a shared commitment to action. This is the vision behind the Climate Tipping Point series. Not just a collection of graphic novels, but a catalyst for meaningful change. Our goal is to make climate action relatable, urgent, and most importantly, impossible to ignore. I am honored to be working alongside an exceptional team. My writing colleague, the prolific Ms. Dawn French, my right-hand creative partner, senior animator and illustrator, Shem Emmanuel, is somewhere, okay. My cluster partners, studio partners, Ebenezer Akaju and Emmanuel James from Ultra Fantasy Comics out of Africa. Together, we are proud to collaborate with Dr. Fletcher and his NGO Soloricon. And we deeply, deeply appreciate his trust in our studios to bring this vision to life. Now, we hope that you find the Climate Tipping Point series not only an engaging read, but also a powerful catalyst for awareness, conversations, and most importantly, action. If these stories move you, share them. If they spark ideas, pursue them. And if they awaken a sense of purpose, channel that into something bigger and even more effective towards the mitigation of the climate crisis that we all face. Because the tipping point isn't just about the climate. It's about our survival as a species. And now, that's my little bit about that. And now, I'd like to invite my colleague, Dawn, to say a few words. Yeah, thank you.
No, I need. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome. The graphic novels before you and those yet to come rely not on fiction, but on fact. Research is a critical partner in this endeavor. As the writers involved, we rely on reports and scientific papers, breaking news, I'm just going to pause there because I know that highway, they just cut through the Amazon, going to find itself into one of our comics. Remember I said that, right? And the expertise and experience of subject matter experts like Jimmy Fletcher on climate change, and because Don put all my business out, Don French on disaster management protocols and response. With the script done, what we would do is we would troubleshoot because we already know what the titles are. We have, with Jimmy, we have laid out what the full series, the titles are supposed to be, and an idea of what each story is going to be. So we then, as we come to each one, I'll say the next one is dangerous disease. So that, and we mentioned health a while ago in the presentation. So we troubleshoot on what the idea is, and then we get to writing. And once the script is done, the illustrations start. And yes, you did hear Africa. So that the team that works on these illustrations are based in St. Lucia and in Mama Africa. And I'm just going to step aside for 2 seconds so you can see the illustrations behind me. When you get a copy of the comic, notice the design. It's on purpose. When it opens, it can be a poster. So all the comics are designed that way, that when you open it up, and maybe one day we'll get sponsorship and actually make the posters, hint, hint, everybody watching online, we can make the posters. And then, of course, you'll see where we cartoonize Jimmy at the end when he puts his speech at the end. So as you can see, creating a document like this is a collaborative affair, as will be our efforts to save our world. Because so far, there is no planet B. Thank you. And if I may just say, for those watching online, if you wanted, there are some of them, the 3 titles are already based on, you can get them on Amazon, with the next 2 coming out soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Branford, Ms. French, and Dr. Fletcher for your remarks. Now that we're moving smoothly along again, I would like to call back Dr. James Fletcher to give you a little insight on our Youth Activism program, which is going to be launched in 2025, which is our next stepping stone for Youth IRI and the Caribbean Climate Justice Project. So, Dr. Fletcher.
Thanks, Genesis. So, yeah, we have 3 issues of the graphic novel series out already. The next 2 are actually already done. We're just in the process, I think, of finalizing 1 or 2 things so that they can go to the publisher. It's next 2 issues are Scary Storms 1 and Scary Storms 2. So the next 2 issues deal with a hurricane that is approaching a country. Most of these are set in a fictitious country called Santa Bella. And Santa Bella, you see very many similarities between Santa Bella and many of the countries in the Caribbean. So Scary Storms 1 is the preparation for the hurricane, and they're preparing for what I think is supposed to be a Cat 1, which, again, as Dawn said, ripped from the headlines, just suddenly, like Hurricane Otis did to Acapulco 2 years ago. Hurricane Otis went from being a tropical storm to a Cat 5 hurricane in the course of 12 hours. So something very similar happens in Scary Storms 1, and Scary Storms 2 is the aftermath. Dangerous Diseases 1 and 2 then follow. And that's actually quite interesting. We're still working out some of the medical and science things to make sure we get it right, particularly the epidemiology of it. But in Dangerous Diseases, without giving away too much of the plot, this group of friends go on a Arctic cruise, and one of the friends picks up a piece of melting ice, puts it in a drink, being very exotic, and put it in a drink in a cocktail, and then suddenly, problems. So the graphic novel series is the first part really of our youth activism program. But really our Youth Activism 2025 program is us, and when we speak of activism, we really are blending art, creative expression with activism. And that's how, and activism is not our term, that's a term that's been around for a while. So, and if I'm sure you've seen these pictures, that's actually my inspiration for all of this. Jonathan Gladding is somebody who has inspired me with the work he's done from day one. His first poster the one in the middle, 1.5 to stay alive, was our poster when we were negotiating the Paris Agreement. And that really was almost our rallying call. This young girl up to her neck in water. And I was really fortunate when I came back from Paris on negotiating the Paris Agreement. The sustainable development people here in St. Lucia had actually arranged a meeting in the VIP hall at UNO International Airport, where I met with Jonathan and this young lady who was the model for this. And it was really a touching moment, to see this again, what we've been negotiating for brought to life in this young person. So the Youth Activism Program, first of all, we'll start with a Voices of Change podcast. We've already recorded some of the episodes of this podcast, and the podcast is being hosted by two very well-known Caribbean journalists. Alison Kentish, who's no stranger to St. Lucia. Alison worked in St. Lucia. Alison is both Dominican and St. Lucian. She's from Dominica, but I think Alison is a Caribbean person, but primarily Dominican and St. Lucian. So Alison, together with Ryan Bechu. Ryan is Trinidadian, who's been doing some really good work with CNC in Trinidad. The two of them will be hosting Voices of Change podcast, which will come out initially every fortnight. And every fortnight we'll be dealing with an issue related to climate change, biodiversity, sustainable energy, something in that general area. Then we will be launching another prose competition. You remember I said that the first competition we had in 2022 was very successful. 2021, sorry, was very successful. So we'll be doing another prose competition, a poetry competition, a spoken word competition, which is a new one. I think we also will probably try to put in there, you saw the work that Damien's young people did with these short 1-minute videos. I think we'll try to incorporate something like that in there, because that has the ability to go even further. So we'll see how we can work that in, because it was only when I was putting this presentation together yesterday, I said, you know what, I think we should probably do a competition along those lines. A photography competition, a digital art competition. So those are the new elements of it. And the intention, again, is to put all of this together in a new anthology, or maybe two anthologies, I'm not quite sure, depending on the quality of the material that we'll get, and I'm very certain that we will get some really high quality material. Then we will be doing a 6-month training program for 40 Caribbean youth to use animation to tell their stories. So what we want to do is to empower young people with the skills to animate the same way you saw some of it wasn't really animation. It was what Damien's group did was put together a video, but we actually want to use animation, give them the tools, the skills and the software, so that they can create their own animation and they can tell their story and they can make this go even further. Because I didn't mention, but one of the intentions we have with the graphic novel series is to eventually animate Climate Tipping Point, so that Climate Tipping Point can be brought to life on YouTube and wherever else, so that you're not just reading a graphic novel, but you're seeing a graphic novel play out in front of you. And this is just some of the work that we're using at Malfini Studios to do this. And this is some of the work that they've done. This one for the some volume, Randall.
Good morning.
Our lesson today is climate change.
It is when we have super hurricanes, sir.
Well, yes and no. Hurricanes are bigger and stronger, but climate change causes rising sea levels, more intense rainfall, and more longer droughts too. How do we fight it?
Recycle our garbage?
Yes, that will also help to reduce carbon dioxide and methane that causes global warming. Reusing some things will also reduce the amount of garbage we use.
Like conserving water?
Saving water will put less pressure on our water supply. Climate change is melting glaciers, causing rising sea levels. This means fresh water is becoming salty in some places.
Ooh, protect our mangroves.
Yes, our wetlands are home to many creatures, and mangroves protect our coastlines from storms, tsunamis, and hurricanes. They also treat polluted waters, and many people depend on mangroves to make a living.
Like using renewable energy?
Reusing renewable energy like solar and wind to power our towns and cities will reduce greenhouse gases and pollution.
Oh yeah, teacher says forests help stabilize the climate, regulate ecosystems, and protect biodiversity. If we stop cutting down trees and practice smart climate agriculture, we can help to reduce greenhouse gases.
We must also protect our reefs, which are important to the Caribbean. They provide food, tourism jobs, and protect us from storm surges. We all can fight climate change. What will you do?
This message is brought to you by the United States Agency for International Development and the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center.
USAID, which is suffered. I wouldn't say more because these days whatever you say goes online, and when you travel, they watch these things. But anyway, unfortunately, USAID, which did some really good work in the region, that no longer exists, and the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, but done by Malfini. And these are the kinds of skills and tools that we want to give our young people across the Caribbean so that they can produce some of these things themselves to get their stories out, but also to earn a living. We also are collaborating with Taj Weeks. Taj did some work with us in the first 1.5 to Stay Alive video, and has also done quite a bit of work on climate change. And Taj has agreed to work with us to produce a new climate change song. Taj will be collaborating with us for a new song on climate justice. And our poet. In putting this, I saw different pictures of Kendall. I saw pensive Kendall, I saw happy Kendall, but I decided to go instead with fierce Kendall, because that is the Kendall that I like. The Kendall that really has this passion for sustainable energy, for climate change. It's unfortunate that he had planned on being here with us this morning, but certain logistical issues prevented him from being here. I know he's watching online, Kendall, but we're really looking forward to working with Kendall on a production. We've been kind of battling, okay, will it be a theatrical production or will it be something for film? So we're still trying to resolve that right now. It probably will start off being maybe a film production that we then adapt for theater afterwards. But Kendall has agreed to work with us to produce this production on climate justice, and there's some really exciting discussions that we've been having about how do we mix realism with a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of mythical characters inside of there. So, but that's out way above my head. That's for the creatives to do. But that's certainly something that will happen. So, we're very excited about this youth activism program, and I'm hoping that I was able to convey some of that excitement across to you. This is something that we're really looking forward to. We think it will be the same way our 1.5 to Stay Alive civil society campaign helped us in 2015 to galvanize civil society, particularly young people, our artists, our journalists, in this fight for the future of our planet and the future of our civilization. I just want to mention one thing. There is no planet B for us. But Earth will continue to survive. We won't kill Earth with what we're doing. We will just kill our ability to continue to survive on Earth, because the planet won't die. The planet will continue evolving, and maybe it's only cockroaches and mosquitoes, my two least favorite species, that will exist, but they will exist. The problem is we're making life very inhospitable for us. So how do we ensure that we get everybody to understand that we really are in a fight for our planet? Where we are heading right now, Dawn can tell you, not Dawn French, but Dawn Pierre-Nathaniel, that although we've fought for 1.5 degrees Celsius as really the upper limit of our livability, the upper threshold for small island developing states, we're heading now for 2.6 degrees Celsius warming by the end of the century, reaching 3 degrees Celsius. I can't even begin to tell you what that's going to mean for us. There are some countries that will cease to exist. There are countries in the Pacific, like Kiribati, Marshall Islands, that will no longer exist. They will be flooded out. There are some of the islands in the Bahamas that will disappear. Some of our coastlines, if you look at maybe even if a 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, and I did a feature address at the SLHT, and I see Tony in the room, and Tony covered it, that some of the developments that we're thinking of doing right now are being imperiled by the current trajectory of warming. Some of the great plans that we have for the development of our ports will be in peril because of the warming, that the sea level rise that we'll get with 1.5 degrees Celsius. So these are things that we have to fight for. These are things that we have to ensure do not happen. And I know it's out of our control, but we have the ability, one, to lobby, to advocate, but also to ensure that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. So if we know that certain areas are vulnerable, then we shouldn't build in those areas, and we shouldn't do things in those areas, or we shouldn't have developments, for example, that clear out mangroves. When we clear out mangroves so that we can put the next marina, we are destroying that defense that prevents the next storm surge from coming in and damaging our coastline. We're also taking out that filter that prevents the silt that is produced inland from reaching our oceans and clogging up our coral reefs. So there are things that we are doing right now. We're clearing slopes and we're putting up houses with roofs. And what these roofs are doing is concentrating water. So whenever it rains, you get a deluge of water coming down instead of that water just gently percolating down into the soil. You know, some of the rainfall we're getting now that's causing flooding is no different to the rainfall that my grandparents and my parents and my great-grandparents saw. It's just that our conditions have changed so much that our ecosystem can no longer handle it. So this is really about using these media, using creativity, using young people, using civil society to get that message out. And for us to stop thinking that climate change is a problem for the Department of Sustainable Development and the government. It's not. They just happen to be the people who are positioned and paid to bring this to your attention and to try to catalyze action, but really the action resides with us. And this is really what we're trying to do with this Caribbean Climate Justice and Youth IRE project and with the Youth Activism project. So that's, you know, I almost felt like I was a preacher in front of a pulpit, but I know I'm speaking not to the converted in this room, but to a much larger audience. And I think it's necessary sometimes for us to get that message across. So thank you very much. We look forward to you continuing to collaborate with us. If you have any ideas, if there are things that, if something Brandy said, something Dawn said, something that other Dawn said, Dawn Pianathoniel, something Genesis said, or something that I said that has spurred something in you, then please, you know, reach out to us, reach out to Genesis. Genesis is the program manager for the Caribbean Climate Justice Project. Reach out to her. She will work with it and we can see how, because we want this to be as grassroots and as people-led as possible. And Damien, it's a pity that we can no longer work with your St. George's University people, but again, we will reach out to you to see how we can, you know, get something else going, particularly that nexus between climate change and health, which I don't think many people understand how important it is. Yeah. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fletcher. And as we come very near to the end, I will ask one more time. What is the theme for Earth Day 2025? Excuse me? Thank you, class. And I'm very, very happy that you guys were attentive and paid attention. So now that we move into the little entertainment segment, I would like to welcome Mr. Chaz, our steel panist, our local steel panist, to come and serenade us today. He's a young person and he's a very talented person that I would have had the pleasure to go to school with. So take it away. Welcome, Chaz, ladies and gentlemen.
That's way too short for you, right?
Okay, thank you very much. They were trying to accommodate me, but it was a little bit too short. So now that we are essentially at the end of our launch for our Climate Tipping Point graphic novel, I'd first like to thank the British High Commission for bringing us here again and allowing us to use their residence. I also would like to further thank our guests, specially invited guests, those of you who would have sponsored, participate in any of our initiatives, Calabash TV, DBS, all of our streaming media personnel who came today, and our Youth ARI members, our Youth ARI ambassadors, CYEN. If I forgot to mention you, I'm so sorry, but thank you so much for coming out. We know it took a lot from you to give up an hour or two of your busy schedule, take a little time from your working day. But again, thank you. It was worth it. It was good to see that the young people, what we are really doing at the Caribbean Climate Justice Project, and showing you guys that we're looking forward to have more initiatives, and we would love for you to come on board. Also, as a special treat, we are giving everybody free copies of the books presented here on your way out. So you'll collect it at the back on your way to refreshments or on your way from refreshments. And then we can just, have a jolly day, network, socialize, get familiar with each other. And what is the theme for today again? We go in and eat. So let's say it louder. What's the theme for today? Our power, our planet. Oh, so after my closing, we would like to go through our project Voices, our 6 months animation series. They would just like to give a little more information on that. So just hold the closing for a little bit and the refreshments. I'll be back. Thank you very much. I'd like to call on Mr. Karim Nelson now to give his little presentation.
Good morning. I was saying that I almost escaped. I see Genesis was already closing today's proceedings, but I'm very honored to be here with you guys today. In my professional capacity, I'm the communications officer at Export St. Lucia, but today I guess you can call me the interim spokesperson for Malfini Productions to just give you a little bit of insights on our Project Voices. As our speakers would have highlighted previously, across the Caribbean, and I can speak more personally for St. Lucia, we are facing the very real consequences of climate change. It's no longer some distant warning in a scientific report. Every St. Lucian knows that a hot day, it's not just another hot day, it's record-breaking. We're seeing it in longer dry seasons, erratic rainfall, dangerous heat waves, and the damage from more intense hurricanes. Livelihoods are under pressure, coastal communities are at risk. And too often, these realities are not fully understood, especially by the younger generation, not because we don't care, but because we haven't always communicated the urgency in the ways that resonate with them, and that's where Project Voices comes in. So Project Voices is a training program that empowers young Caribbean artists to use 2D animation as a tool for climate advocacy. But more than that, it's a move to turn creative talent into climate action, to take the raw power of storytelling and put it into work against one of the biggest threats we face. Stories about the effects of climate change and the people living through them. Because when facts don't move people, stories can. So why climate change? I would have touched on this in my preamble a bit. But for us in the Caribbean, climate change is about what's happening in our own backyards. It's the heat that makes the classrooms unbearable. It's salt water creeping into farming land. And you may speak to a farmer and he may not say climate change is affecting my farm. He may tell you that the yield he has now is not what it used to be. A fisherman might not say, hey, there's no fish, but he'll tell you what we used to catch before, it's not the same. So these are the very real effects of climate change. And when we think of it like that, it becomes very real to us and we are able to digest it better. We don't need more convincing, we just need more tools, and the Project Voices project aims to be one of those tools. So just a simple project overview. So over 6 months, participants will be immersed in every stage of the animation process, from scripting, storyboarding, character development, animation, and post-production. This is practical hands-on learning by with working professionals in the field. What they walk away with isn't just a new skill, it is a purpose for their art. So the training approach is hybrid and very simple, and we wanted to make it accessible for all. So we'll have 20 in-person trainees at Malfini Studios in St. Lucia, while 40 more will be joining us online across the region. That means no matter where you are in the region, you can join the movement. And every participant will receive guidance from industry mentors from St. Lucia, Jamaica, and beyond. And these are some of our local mentors and industry professionals. I know we're familiar with Dawn French, Roseanne Daniel, Shem Emmanuel, Akil Bennett, and of course, Mr. Milton Branford. And while these persons are recognized locally and in the Caribbean, I just want to note that they are recognized internationally and they are well skilled in what they do and in their profession. So who can apply and who can be a part of Project Voices? All we're calling on young people who already have some digital illustration or animation experience, those with a passion for storytelling, and a desire to do more with their art. But most of all, we want people who are ready to learn, collaborate, and create something with impact. So the benefits for artists and why should I join Project Voices? Here's what's in it for them. One-on-one mentorship with, as I mentioned, some of the most skilled mentors in the field. I would have highlighted their names before. There is room for professional development, a community of like-minded individuals, and a platform to produce climate animations that can truly change minds. The opportunity to be part of something much bigger than yourself. So our goal is to help young creatives produce animations that capture both the challenges and solutions around climate change. We want their work to reach schools, communities, policymakers, and spark conversations, and more importantly, spark change. Art has the ability to humanize the science. But of course, with everything, there will be challenges, but we know that the path isn't easy, but we're committed to overcoming them. So we recognize that not everyone may have access to the best technology. Balancing storytelling and with the science takes care and effort, and we must ensure diversity, not just in who creates the stories, but in whose stories are told. But for those challenges, we're ready to face them head on because the mission matters. So this is just a slide which breaks down who really made or what really is going to make this project successful. It's made possible through the support of Soloricon, our lead funder, who understands that climate advocacy needs to be multifaceted. Their backing helps us deliver training and provide equipment and expand outreach. But this is just the start, and we would of course welcome more partners, more supporters, and more believers in this cause. So this is just a breakdown of our partners and the collaborative effort to make this a reality. with Malfini Film and Animation Studio in St. Lucia, Castle Productions in Jamaica. Together, we're building something that's regional, relevant, and rooted in the Caribbean reality. And just to tie into, as you would see at the bottom, you'd see the Caribbean climate justice, I apologize, and the Youth IRE project. And just to tie into this slide, we want the artists to become assets. These artists will go on to lead campaigns, create content, and shape how the Caribbean talks and thinks about climate change. So think of it like this. One trainee creates an animation on coral reef protection. It goes viral. A local community starts a reef restoration project because of it. And that's what we mean by change, and it is within reach. So let's make it a reality. So I'm encouraging everyone to join the movement. If you believe in climate action, support this project. If you believe in youth leadership, share this initiative. If you believe in art with purpose, join Project Voices. We can't wait for another Category 5 hurricane to wake us up. And speaking personally, I think young people, we do have the interest, we do have the concern, but for most of us, sometimes we don't know where to start or how to become a part of it. Project Voices provides that perfect platform for us to join in the fight. The time is now, and the movement has already begun. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson, for going over Project Voices. Just a reminder that Project Voices will be our animation series launch across the region, where 40 young people from the Caribbean will benefit from this program. Without further ado, I'd like to thank you again for coming. And ladies and gentlemen, the refreshments is to the back. You can go on ahead. And on your way out, please don't forget to collect your goodie bag with your Climate Tipping Point series novels. You will be getting them for free. And afterwards, if your friends are interested, they can always purchase it on Amazon. Inside the bags are the QR codes where you can scan. We made it easier for you. Instead of searching the names, you can scan the QR codes and find the books online. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.